Only a couple weeks away. Can you believe it? From the start of the 2020 NFL season, we've had a chance to see some of the team's practices during training camp. Here with me today to talk all about the Philadelphia Eagles, Pat Gallen from CBS Philly. How's it going, Pat?
It's going well, Katie. How are you?
Hey, doing well, and it's finally looking like we might start seeing some football shortly. Let's start with how the Eagles have adapted to this totally unusual offseason and also the cancellation of the preseason. How is that affecting their preparations?
Well, it's affecting it like every other team across the NFL. It's all very new. Every day brings something different. The players are being tested constantly, but a couple of things stand out. Obviously, if you're at camp, you're seeing coaches and players who aren't taking part in practice. They're all wearing masks, so that's clearly important to make sure that no one contracts COVID and then spreads it around the team, because that would be a huge problem, not only for the team itself, but for the coaches and then whoever they might be playing. So that's one thing. Two, Doug Peterson has preached, be smart about it. Doug Peterson actually had COVID-19. He was forced to stay away from the team for 2 weeks while he quarantined. He's okay now, and a couple of players obviously had it with the Eagles. But he just said, be smart, and that's because you'll ruin it for everyone. So all it takes is one person to spread this throughout an entire team. Be smart about it, and let's just try and get through week by week, basically.
Well, and the offense suffered just a lot of injuries last season, leaving Carson Wentz without any big names surrounding him. So has the supporting cast improved this season? And I guess, what do you expect from Wentz in year 5?
I expect Carson Wentz to take the next step forward. Last year, we saw a skeleton crew on offense throughout. Guys that had barely played wide receiver before. Greg Ward, who was a quarterback in college at the University of Houston, he was their number one wide receiver by the end of the year because injuries had decimated it. Yet the Eagles still made the playoffs. I know that was more maybe because of the Cowboys, but we don't have to go there right now. That being said, I think Carson Wentz takes the next step forward because they have more weapons. They will hopefully be healthier. And you can kind of look at it like they've got two sets of offensive weapons. You got the guys that everyone knows. You got Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert and Alshon Jeffrey when he comes back, Deshaun Jackson and Miles Sanders, who looks like he could be a real force out of the backfield. And then they've got the second tier, which includes first-round pick Jalen Reagor, who is hurt. He's going to miss a couple of weeks. So that's a big loss. But then you've got him. You've got J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who was their number 2 pick from last year, who really didn't pan out. Looks like he has been better in camp, so that's big. And then a couple of guys, Quez Watkins and John Hightower as well. So it's like this two-tiered approach. They think they've got more depth. So I think that Doug Peterson and company think that Carson Wentz can be even better. Let's just keep people on the field. That's what it's all about.
Keep people on the field and keep them healthy. You touched on this just a moment ago, Pat, about how Jalen Reagor is injured. His shoulder appears to be the injury or the problem here, and he's going to be out for the first few weeks of the season. So how does that change the outlook for this offense, or does it?
It does a little bit. He was slated to be a starter with Alshon Jeffrey hurt. He's not going to be ready for the start of the season. So it would have been Deshaun Jackson, Jalen Reagor, and then Greg Ward in the slot. So that does shuffle some things around a little bit. And that second tier that I talked about, one of those guys is going to have to step in, at least in the near term, and take his spot. And I think what they were really excited about is the speed. Deshaun Jackson on one side, Jalen Reagor on the other, 2 burners, something they really haven't had here in Philly maybe since Deshaun Jackson and Jeremy Maclin like a decade ago. So they were looking forward to that. Eventually, we think we'll see that once Reagor comes back and hopefully Deshaun stays healthy. So, yeah, it's a big deal. There are a couple of other injuries, though, that may even be a bigger deal. Brandon Brooks, who is their all-pro guard, he's done for the season. They brought Jason Peters back, who was their tackle last year, slide him to guard, and now they lose their starting tackle, Andre Dillard, for the year. So they've been ravaged by injuries already without preseason games. It's been kind of a tough go here throughout training camp and then leading into the season, which is just about 11 days away. Pretty rough already.
And switching gears here, Pat, I want to talk about the defense because the Eagles added some big pieces to the defense in the offseason, bringing in Javon Hargrave along the defensive line and Darius Slay in the secondary. So what are the expectations this year for Jim Schwartz's unit?
Just be better than last year. And really the biggest issue from last season, and it's kind of been an issue now for a couple of years under Jim Schwartz. The Eagles struggle with number one wide receivers, and we saw that against the Cowboys. Amari Cooper lit them up. It's always been that way for as long as Jim Schwartz has been here, but he hasn't had a number one cornerback that can follow these top wide receivers like Darius Slay, who you mentioned. They pick him up from the Lions in the offseason. So I think expectations for him are high, and the defensive line as a whole, it's always been anchored by Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, but you mentioned Javon Hargrave. And a big addition, and I say an addition even though he was on the team last year, Malik Jackson got injured week 1, was a huge signing 2 off seasons ago, played just not even 1 game, and he was done for the year. So that's a big addition as well. They bring Vinny Curry back. So really it comes down to this new look secondary where you add Darius Slay, but you lose Malcolm Jenkins. And then a Jim Schwartz defense always comes down to, can they get pressure on the quarterback? And they think that they've got the pieces in place along the front to do that.
Overall, Pat, no team has won the NFC East in back-to-back years in the last 15 seasons. I mean, let's be honest, the NFC East isn't necessarily the best division in the league, but can the Eagles break the streak here? Can they come out on top?
Well, I think they can, and I think that my friends down there in Dallas would probably agree with me that it's a 2-horse race at the top of the NFC East. It's Dallas and it's Philly this year, and it was last year as well. The Giants and Washington just aren't very good. So, yeah, the Eagles can win, but they've got to stay healthy throughout the year, and I think they did put pieces in place that help them deal with the weapons that the Cowboys have. I mean, that offense is stacked with Cooper and Gallup and CeeDee Lamb and Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, that's a force. So the Eagles are better prepared for that. And then offensively, if the Birds can stay healthy this year, which they could not do last year, certainly they can win. But I think it's going to come down to the wire. It should be an interesting NFC East at the top.
Well, and we'll be able to see kind of how all this plays out. What you said, like 11 days until the season starts. Can you believe it? We're that close to the start of the 2020 NFL season. We'll see how all this shakes out. Thanks so much, Pat, for hanging out with me today, chatting all about the Eagles' upcoming season. They kick off their season in Washington September 13th. Katie Johnston for CBS Philly.